In the shadowy heart of London's Lanverley Mews, a quiet dinner at number 7 turns deadly when Philip Drayton, a charming but ambitious secretary, is found stabbed through the heart with a silver letter opener. Who lured him to his death with a cryptic note reading, 8:30, meet me, urgent? Was it the elegant Eleanor Vane, hiding a secret beneath her poised exterior? The stern financier Sir Reginald, whose wealth masks financial ruin? Or perhaps the sharp-tongued Clara Beaumont, guarding a shameful past? As Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective, steps into this closed circle of suspects, every clue, a smudge of mud, a stopped clock, a misplaced glove, unravels a web of lies, betrayal, and forbidden desires. With his little grey cells, Poirot will expose the killer in a shocking reveal that will leave you questioning. Who can you trust when everyone has a secret? Dive into this gripping Agatha Christie-style mystery, where suspense builds to a heart-stopping climax, and the truth is never what it seems. Chapter 1. The Quiet of Lanverley Mews. The autumn dusk settled over Lanverley Mews with a hush that seemed almost conspiratorial. Tucked behind the bustling thoroughfares of London's Mayfair, the Mews was a relic of a quieter age, a cobbled lane of converted stables, now home to discreet townhouses where the wealthy hid their secrets behind ivy-clad walls. The gas lamps flickered to life, casting long shadows across the stones, and the air carried the faint scent of damp leaves and coal smoke. It was the sort of evening, Captain Arthur Hastings thought, as he strolled beside his friend Hercule Poirot, that seemed to promise nothing more dramatic than a good dinner and a glass of claret. Yet, as he would later reflect, such evenings often held the seeds of something far more sinister. "Mon ami," said Poirot, his voice crisp as the October air, "you observe, do you not, the peculiar charm of this place? So orderly, so restrained, and yet beneath such calm there is always the possibility of chaos." His small, neat figure, clad in an immaculate overcoat, moved with a precision that matched his financier of considerable repute, whose recent marriage to a much younger woman had set tongues wagging in polite society. The invitation had come through a mutual acquaintance, a certain Lady Cranston, who had described the gathering as a small, intimate affair to introduce Sir Reginald's new bride Eleanor to a select circle of friends. Hastings, ever fond of good company, had accepted eagerly. Poirot, however, had agreed with a certain reluctance, his curiosity piqued not by the promise of fine food, but by a cryptic remark Lady Cranston had let slip. "There's something odd about that house, Monsieur Poirot. I can't quite put my finger on it." Number 7 Lanverley Mews was a handsome Georgian townhouse, its facade gleaming white in the lamplight. As they approached, the door opened to reveal a butler, his expression as stiff as his starched collar. "Good evening, gentlemen," he intoned. "Sir Reginald is expecting you." The hall was a study in understated opulence. Polished oak floors, a crystal chandelier, and a marble-topped table bearing a vase of late roses. Hastings noted the faint scent of beeswax and lavender, a testament to meticulous housekeeping. They were ushered into a drawing-room where a small group was already assembled, their voices low and their smiles polite but strained. Sir Reginald Vane stood by the fireplace, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, his silver hair gleaming under the gaslight. His face, handsome in a stern way, bore the lines of a man accustomed to command. Beside him stood his wife, Eleanor, a strikingly beautiful woman, no older than 30, with auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, and eyes that seemed to hold a flicker of unease. She wore a gown of emerald silk, its sheen catching the light as she moved to greet them. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Sir Reginald said, his voice booming with forced joviality. "A pleasure to have you here. Allow me to introduce my wife, Eleanor." Eleanor's smile was warm but fleeting, her handshake delicate. "I've heard so much about you, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but exchanged pleasantries. Hastings felt the undercurrent of tension that Poirot had so astutely predicted. Clara Beaumont's barbed remarks about Eleanor's youth drew a tight smile from Sir Reginald. Julian Marsh's attempts at charm seemed to falter under Eleanor's cool gaze. Dr. Grayson, meanwhile, kept glancing at his pocket watch, as if eager to be elsewhere. Only Lady Cranston seemed at ease, her eyes darting from face to face with the keen interest of a spectator at a play. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under candlelight. The meal was exquisite. Consommé, followed by roast pheasant and a delicate lemon soufflé. But the conversation remained stilted. Poirot, seated beside Eleanor, spoke little, his attention fixed on the interplay of glances and gestures. Hastings, opposite Miss Beaumont, endured her lecture on the decline of modern manners with good-natured patience. It was as the dessert plates were cleared that the evening took its fatal turn. A piercing scream echoed from the upper floors, sharp and unmistakable. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock. Sir Reginald leapt to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. "What the devil?" he began, but before he could finish, the butler burst into the room, his face ashen. "Sir," he stammered, It's upstairs, in the study. You must come at once." Without a word, Sir Reginald strode from the room, the others following in a disordered rush. Poirot, however, lingered, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the abandoned dining table, the half-empty glasses, the crumpled napkins, the single glove left carelessly on a chair. "Hastings," he murmured, "observe. The scene, it is set. The drama, it begins." They ascended the staircase to find Sir Reginald standing in the doorway of a richly appointed study, his face drained of colour. On the floor, sprawled beside a mahogany desk, lay a man in evening dress, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A dark stain spread across his shirt front, and a silver letter opener. It lay where it had fallen, his lifeless eyes fixed on the ornate plasterwork of the ceiling. The silver letter opener, its blade stained crimson, glinted accusingly in the lamplight. The guests crowded the doorway, their faces a mixture of horror and fascination, while Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small frame radiating an almost palpable calm. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "What a tragedy! And yet, what a puzzle!" His eyes, sharp and unyielding, moved methodically across the scene, noting the details with the precision of a watchmaker. The overturned inkpot on the desk, the half-open drawer, the faint smudge of mud on the windowsill. He turned to Sir Reginald Vane, whose broad shoulders seemed to sag under the weight of the moment. "Sir Reginald, if you please, who was the last to see Monsieur Drayton alive?" Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, his gaze flickering toward his wife, Eleanor, who stood pale and silent at his side. I don't know," he said gruffly. "He was here when we went down to dinner. Said he had some letters to finish. I told him to join us later, but he never came." Poirot's moustache twitched slightly, a sign Hastings recognized as the detective's mind beginning to weave its intricate web. "And this letter opener," Poirot said, gesturing to the weapon without touching it. "It is yours, n'est-ce pas?" Sir Reginald nodded,
his expression grim. "Yes, it's been in my family for years, kept on the desk for opening correspondence. Anyone could have picked it up." "Anyone indeed," Poirot said softly, his tone carrying a hint of something unreadable. He turned to the butler, who hovered nervously near the door. "Monsieur, what is your name?" "Carson, sir," the man replied, his voice unsteady. "James Carson." "Bon. And it was you who discovered the body?" "Yes, sir. I heard a scream. Mrs. Vane's maid, Lucy, it was. She'd come up to fetch a shawl for her mistress and saw this."
Carson gestured helpless paper with care, revealing a few scrawled words in black ink. 8:30. Meet me. Urgent. He held it up to the light, his brow furrowing. A clue, Hastings. Perhaps the first thread in our tapestry. But we must be cautious. The hand that wrote this may yet hold the key to our mystery. The police arrived shortly after, led by Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, a familiar figure whose brusque manner belied a grudging respect for Poirot's methods. Japp surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, his notebook already open. "Well, Poirot," he said, "you've landed yourself in the thick of it again. Looks like a nasty business. Stabbed, clean through the heart, I'd wager. Any thoughts?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Thoughts, mon cher Japp? I have many, but they are not yet ready to be shared. First, we must establish the facts. The time of death, the alibis, the motives. All must be examined with the utmost care." Japp grunted, turning to his men. "Right, lads, let's get to work. Photograph the scene, dust for prints, and get that letter opener bagged. And someone fetch the coroner." As the police set about their tasks, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. "Hastings, my friend, observe the guests as they wait downstairs. Their faces, their gestures, their words. They will tell us much. Grief, fear, guilt, all leave their marks, and we must be ready to read them." The drawing room where the guests had reassembled was a study in strained civility. Eleanor Vane sat rigidly on a velvet settee, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on some distant point. Sir Reginald paced by the fireplace, his earlier composure fraying at the edges. Dr. Lionel Grayson, his spectacles fogged with nervous perspiration, muttered something about the fragility of life. Clara Beaumont, her lips pursed, sipped her sherry with a look of grim satisfaction, as if death itself confirmed her low opinion of humanity. Julian Marsh leaned against the wall, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. While air unanswered, Sir Reginald stopped pacing, his face darkening. "He was a good man," he said curtly. "Loyal to a fault, handled my correspondence, my investments, knew his place." Eleanor's voice was soft but steady. "He was kind to me, always respectful. He helped me settle into this house when I first arrived." Clara Beaumont snorted. "Kind? Oh, come now. Philip Drayton was a climber, always sniffing out opportunities. I wouldn't be surprised if he'd made enemies along the way." "Clara, really?" Lady Cranston chided, but her eyes gleamed with curiosity. Poirot's gaze settled on Clara. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, you speak with conviction. Tell me, what enemies might a man like Drayton have made?" Clara's lips curled into a thin smile. "I'm sure I couldn't say. But men like him, ambitious, charming, they always step on toes, don't they? Perhaps he stepped on the wrong ones." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps. And yet it is not the toes that concern me, but the heart. For it is there, in the heart, that murder begins." As the police continued their work upstairs, Poirot began to question each guest in turn, his manner polite but relentless. He noted their alibis. Sir Reginald had been in the dining room from 8 o'clock onward. Eleanor had stepped out briefly to speak with her maid at 8:15. Grayson had been seen in the hall at 8:20. Marsh claimed to have been in the cloakroom, and Clara insisted she'd never left the table. Lady Cranston, ever observant, confirmed the timings but admitted she'd been distracted by conversation. The clock on the mantel struck 10, its chimes a sombre reminder of the hour. Poirot paused, his eyes lingering on the note he'd found in Drayton's pocket. 8:30, meet me, urgent, he murmured, a rendezvous that ended in death. But whose hand held the blade? That, mes amis, is the question. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The drawing-room at No. 7 Lanverley Mews had grown stifling, despite the cool autumn air seeping through the half-open windows. The guests sat in uneasy silence, their earlier attempts at civility fraying under the weight of Philip Drake.
The initial examination of the crime scene re-entered the room, his face etched with the weary determination of a man accustomed to grim discoveries. "Right then," he said, addressing the group. "The coroner's on his way, and my men are securing the study. No one's to leave this house until we've got statements from everyone. Monsieur Poirot, I assume you'll be sticking your nose in as usual." Poirot inclined his head, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Mon cher Jappe, you do me too much honor. I am here merely as a guest, but if my little grey cells can be of service, I shall not refuse." Jappe snorted, but there was a glint of respect in his eyes. "Just don't go rearranging my evidence, Poirot. Now, let's start with the basics. Who saw Drayton last and when?" Sir Reginald Vane cleared his throat, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "As I said, I spoke to him before dinner. Around 7:45, I'd say. He was in the study working on some correspondence. I told him to join us when he was done, but he seemed preoccupied." "Preoccupied?" Poirot's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of a command. "In what way, Sir Reginald?" Sir Reginald hesitated, his fingers tightening around the arm of his chair. "He was agitated, perhaps. Kept glancing at his watch. Said something about needing to finish a letter before joining us." Poirot's eyes flickered to the note he had found in Drayton's pocket, now safely tucked into his waistcoat. 8:30, meet me, urgent. He made no mention of it, instead turning to Eleanor Vane, whose pale face seemed to glow in the candlelight. "Madame Vane, you knew Monsieur Drayton well, did you not? As your husband's secretary, he must have been a frequent presence in your life." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. Philip was helpful. He assisted me with settling into the household, arranging my appointments, that sort of thing. He was always courteous."
Cranston interjected, her plump hands fluttering in distress. "Philip was a dear boy. Always so attentive. Why, just last week, he helped me with a charitable donation for the orphanage. He didn't have to, you know." Dr. Lionel Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his voice hesitant. "I didn't know him well, but he seemed competent. He came to me once or twice for minor ailments, headaches mostly. Said he worked long hours." Julian Marsh, who had been silent until now, leaned forward, his slicked-back hair catching the light. "Drayton was ambitious, I'll give him that. Knew the stock market better than most. We talked business a few times. He had big plans, wanted to strike out on his own someday." Poirot's gaze lingered on Marsh, noting the young man's restless energy. "Big plans, you say? And did these plans, perhaps, threaten anyone in this room?"
Marsh's eyes darted away, and he shrugged. Not that I know of. Just talk, you know. Dreams. Poirot nodded slowly, his fingers brushing the edge of his mustache. Dreams, Monsieur Marsh, can be dangerous things, especially when they collide with the dreams of others. The questioning continued, with Japp taking detailed notes and Poirot interjecting with precise, probing questions. Each guest provided an alibi for the crucial window between 8 o'clock and 8:47, when the clock in the study had stopped, presumably when Drayton was attacked. Sir Reginald had been in the dining room, as had Lady Cranston and Clara Beaumont. Eleanor had left briefly at 8:15 to speak with her maid, Lucy, returning by 8:25. Grayson had stepped into the hall at 8:20 to retrieve a handkerchief from his coat, and Marsh claimed to have been in the cloakroom from 8:25 to 8:35, adjusting his tie. Poirot listened intently, his mind cataloguing each detail, each inflection. He noted the way Eleanor's eyes avoided her husband's, the faint tremor in Grayson's hands, the defiant tilt of Clara's chin. But it was the absence of one person that intrigued him most. "Monsieur Carson," he said, addressing the butler, "you meant
To tell Mr. Carson, did you see anyone else in the study or the corridor?" Poirot asked. Lucy shook her head. "No, sir. It was quiet. Too quiet." Like Poirot thanked her and dismissed her gently, his mind already turning over the new piece of the puzzle. The stopped clock at 8:47, the note in Drayton's pocket, the open window with its smudge of mud, all pointed to a carefully orchestrated crime. But by whom? And why? As the police continued their work upstairs, Poirot drew Hastings aside once more. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "this is no random act of violence. The killer knew Drayton's habits, his movements. This was a crime of calculation, and we must be equally precise in unraveling it." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. "But Poirot, that note, 8:30, meet me, urgent. Someone lured him to his death." "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "And that someone, mon ami, is still among us." Chapter 4. The questions begin. The drawing room at number 7 Lanverley Mews had taken on the air of a stage, with Hercule Poirot as its quiet yet commanding director. The gas lamps cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, but their faces betrayed a chill that no fire could dispel. The weight of Philip Drayton's murder hung over them, and Poirot, with his meticulous precision, was determined to peel back the layers of their carefully constructed facades. Captain Hastings, seated near the door, watched his friend with a growing sense of anticipation, knowing that Poirot's questions would soon stir the still waters of the evening. Inspector Japp, having returned from overseeing the police's work in the study, stood by the window, his notebook in hand. "Right, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his tone gruff but expectant. "You've got the floor. Let's hear what your famous gray cells have to say." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes sweeping the room. "Merci, Inspector. The task before us is simple, yet complex. A man is dead, and the truth lies not in the chaos of the moment, but in the order of the facts. We shall begin with the alibis, the movement." Study at a critical time. Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap, her knuckles whitening. "I only went to the corridor outside the dining room," she said, her voice steady but strained. "Lucy was fetching my shawl from upstairs. I met her at the foot of the staircase and returned to the table by 8:25. I didn't go near the study." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable. "And yet, madame, the study is but a short distance from the staircase." A matter of steps, perhaps. Eleanor's cheeks flushed. But before she could respond, Clara Beaumont's sharp voice cut through the tension.
Really, Monsieur Poirot? Are you suggesting Eleanor crept upstairs and stabbed poor Philip? Preposterous. She hasn't the nerve for it. Poirot turned to Clara, his eyes gleaming with interest. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you are quick to defend, and yet quicker to accuse others. You have suggested that Monsieur Drayton was a schemer, a man with enemies. Tell me, who might these enemies be? Clara's lips pursed, her sherry glass now a forgotten prop in her hand. I'm sure I couldn't name names. But a man like Drayton, always prying, always charming his way into confidences, he was bound to cross someone. Perhaps he knew too much about someone's affairs. Affairs? Poirot's voice was soft, but the word landed like a stone in still water. The room seemed to hold its breath. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, and Julian Marsh shifted uncomfortably against the wall. Lady Cranston, ever the peacemaker, fluttered her hands. Oh, Clara, you do exaggerate. Philip was a gentleman, always so discreet. Discreet, perhaps, Poirot said, but not invisible. Let us turn to you, Dr. Grayson. You left the dining room at 8:20 to retrieve a handkerchief, oui? A curious errand for a man so nervous. Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his fingers trembling slightly. It was nothing, really. I'd spilled a bit of wine.
Anything unusual? Gestures, glances, absences?
Lady Cranston hesitated, her plump fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Well, I did notice that Philip wasn't at the table, of course. And Eleanor's absence was brief, as she said. But, oh, it's probably nothing. But I thought I saw Mr. Marsh looking rather anxious when he returned from the cloakroom, as if something had startled him. Marsh's face reddened. Nonsense. I was perfectly fine, just adjusting my tie, as I said. Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. The smallest details, madame, are often the most telling. And now we must consider the scene itself. The study, with its stopped clock at 8:47, the open window, the smudge of mud, and this note. He produced the folded paper from his waistcoat, holding it up for all to see. 8:30. Meet me. Urgent. Who wrote this? And why did Monsieur Drayton keep it so close to his heart? A murmur rippled through the room, and Hastings noted the quick glances exchanged among the guests. Sir Reginald's face darkened, Eleanor's eyes widened, and Clara's lips curled into a smirk. Grayson adjusted his spectacles again, while Marsh's fingers resumed their restless drumming. Japp, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. That's a good question, Poirot. My men are checking the handwriting against samples from the house, but I'll wager it's one of you lot who wrote it. Someone lured Drayton to that study, and I mean to find out who. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but authoritative. Patience, mon cher Japp. The truth, it does not yield to haste. We must consider not only who wrote the note, but why. Was it to lure a victim, or to ensnare a killer? The answer lies in the minds of those present, and in the secrets they guard. He turned to Carson, the butler, who stood silently by the door. Monsieur Carson, you have served this household for many years, oui? Tell me, what was Monsieur Drayton's role beyond his duties as secretary?
Do you make of it, Poirot? They're all so guarded. And that note, it's the key, isn't it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The note, Hastings, is but one piece of the puzzle. The real key lies in the hearts of these people, their fears, their desires, their lies, and we, mon ami, shall uncover them all. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The atmosphere in number 7 Lanverley Mews had grown taut as a violin string, each guest ensnared in the web of suspicion spun by Philip Drayton's murder. The drawing-room, once a haven of polished civility, now felt like a courtroom where Hercule Poirot presided with quiet authority. Captain Hastings, seated near the window, watched his friend pace slowly before the fireplace, his small hands clasped behind his back, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of a predator stalking elusive prey. The police, under Inspector Japp's direction, had retreated upstairs to continue their examination of the study, leaving Poirot to probe the minds of the assembled company. Japp re-entered the room, his face set in a scowl. "Well, Poirot," he said, flipping open his notebook, "we've got a bit more to go on. The coroner's preliminary report suggests Drayton was killed between 8:30 and 8:47, matches the stopped clock. Single stab wound to the heart, clean and precise. The letter opener did the job, no question. No fingerprints, though, wiped clean. Whoever did this knew what they were about." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "A professional touch, perhaps, or merely a cautious one. But tell me, Japp, what of the mud on the windowsill, and the open window itself? An escape route, perhaps?" Japp shrugged. "Could be. We're checking the alley behind the mews for footprints, but the cobbles don't hold much. If someone came in from outside, they were careful. My money's on someone in this house, though. That note you found, 8:30, meet me, urgent. It's too convenient. Someone set him up." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice soft but sharp. "And it is to that—" Fingers drumming against his thigh. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I'm particular about my appearance." I was fixing my tie, checking my reflection. As for looking anxious, well, who wouldn't be, with all the wine and chatter going on? I might have been distracted, that's all. "Distracted," Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, the cloakroom is near the staircase, is it not? Close enough to hear footsteps, perhaps, or to see someone ascending to the study." Marsh's face reddened. "I didn't see anyone, if that's what you're getting at. I was in the cloakroom, alone." Clara Beaumont's sharp laugh cut through the room. "Oh, come now, Mr. Marsh. You're not fooling anyone. A man like you, always scheming, always looking for an angle. I wouldn't be surprised if you and Drayton were in cahoots over some shady deal, and it went sour." Marsh rounded on her, his voice rising. "That's a lie. I barely knew the man. We talked stocks, that's all. You're just stirring trouble, as usual." "Enough!" Sir Reginald's voice boomed, his face flushed with anger. "This bickering is pointless. Philip was my secretary, a trusted employee. If anyone had a reason to harm him, it wasn't in this house. Perhaps some outsider, someone from his past." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of suppressed amusement. "An outsider, Sir Reginald? A convenient theory, but the facts, they do not support it. The note, the stopped clock, the letter opener, all point to someone familiar with this house, its routines, its secrets. No, the answer lies here, among us." He turned to Dr. Grayson, whose nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles had grown more pronounced. "Doctor, you have said you stepped into the hall at 8:20 to retrieve a handkerchief, a fleeting absence, yet it places you near the staircase at a time when Monsieur Drayton was likely still alive. Did you hear anything? A voice? A sound? A footstep?"
Grayson's hands froze, his spectacles slipping slightly down his nose. No, nothing. It was quiet. I was only gone a moment.
Look here, Poirot. We can't keep dancing around it. Marsh was out of the room. Grayson was out of the room. Mrs. Vane was out of the room. All during the window when Drayton was killed. One of them's got to be our man, or woman. And that note points to a planned meeting. My money's on Marsh. He's got the look of a man with something to hide. Marsh leapt to his feet, his voice sharp. That's absurd. I had no reason to kill Drayton. If you're looking for a suspect, why not ask Sir Reginald? That letter opener was his after all. And Drayton was close to his wife, maybe too close. The accusation hung in the air, and Sir Reginald's face darkened, his hands balling into fists. How dare you, you insolent pup? Philip was my employee, nothing more. If you're suggesting— Gentlemen, please, Poirot interjected, his voice cutting through the rising tension. Accusations, they are like arrows shot in the dark. They strike blindly and reveal nothing. Let us instead consider the note. 8:30, meet me, urgent. It suggests a rendezvous, oui, but also trust. Monsieur Drayton went to the study expecting to meet someone he knew, someone in this house. Eleanor's voice, soft but clear, broke the silence. Monsieur Poirot, are you saying one of us wrote that note? That one of us planned this? Poirot's eyes met hers, steady and unyielding. Madame, I say only what the facts permit. The note was in his pocket, written in haste, yet deliberate. The killer, they wished to ensure his presence in the study at the fatal moment. And that, mes amis, is where our red herrings swim. He turned to Carson, the butler, who stood silently by the door, his face a mask of professional detachment. Monsieur Carson, you have been most quiet. Tell me, in the days before this tragedy, did Monsieur Drayton receive any visitors, any letters or calls that seemed unusual? Carson hesitated, his eyes flicking toward Sir Reginald. Not that I recall, sir. Mr. Drayton kept to his routine. Letters, accounts, the usual. Though, there was a telephone call yesterday afternoon. He took it
Assumption that it tells the whole story. We must look beyond, to the shadows where the truth hides. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The night had deepened over Lanverley Mews, the gas lamps casting a ghostly glow across the cobbled lane. Inside number 7, the drawing room remained a crucible of tension, where Hercule Poirot's relentless scrutiny seemed to tighten the air around the guests. Captain Hastings, seated by the window, felt the weight of the evening pressing against his temples. He watched Poirot, whose small, neat figure moved with deliberate grace, his eyes darting from face to face as if reading the secrets etched in their expressions. The murder of Philip Drayton had transformed the house into a chessboard, and Poirot was methodically positioning his pieces. Inspector Japp had retreated upstairs to confer with his men, leaving Poirot to continue his probing. The detective stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache a perfect curve of calm authority. Mes amis, he began, his voice soft but commanding. We have established the framework of this tragedy. Monsieur Drayton was killed between 8:30 and 8:47, lured to the study by a note, the letter opener, the stopped clock, the open window, all are pieces of the puzzle. But now we must examine the details, for it is in the smallest inconsistencies that the truth reveals itself. He reached into his waistcoat and produced the folded note once more, holding it delicately between gloved fingers. 8:30. Meet me. Urgent. This note, he said, is our first thread. But there is another detail,
one that has been overlooked. Monsieur Carson, if you please, tell me about the mud on the windowsill. You have cleaned this house for years, oui? Is such a mark common? Carson, the butler, stood rigidly by the door, his face a mask of professionalism. No, sir, he replied. The windows are cleaned weekly, and the sills are always spotless. That mud. It wasn't there this morning. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Bon. A fresh mark. The murder, or only after? Carson hesitated, his eyes flicking towards Sir Reginald, who sat glowering by the fireplace. I can't be certain, sir. Mr. Drayton was particular about his desk, kept it tidy. But when I saw the body, there were papers strewn about, and the inkpot was overturned. Poirot's gaze sharpened. An overturned inkpot, yet no ink on the letter opener or the floor. Curious, no? A struggle, perhaps, but a controlled one. The killer, they were not panicked. They acted with precision. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings noted the way Eleanor Vane's fingers twisted the fabric of her gown. Clara Beaumont, her sharp eyes narrowing, spoke up. You're making this sound like a play, Monsieur Poirot. All these clues and theatrics. Why not just admit it was one of us and be done with it? Poirot turned to her, his expression serene but unyielding. Mademoiselle Beaumont, a play requires a script, and a script requires a writer. I seek the author of this crime, and I shall find them through the details they could not erase. Tell me, did you notice anything unusual about Monsieur Drayton's behavior during dinner, before he retired to the study? Clara's lips pursed, her voice dripping with disdain. He was his usual self, smarmy, attentive, always hovering near Eleanor. I saw him whisper something to her just before we sat down, probably some flattery to curry favor. Eleanor's face flushed, and she spoke quickly. It was nothing, Monsieur Poirot. He only asked if I needed anything before he went to the study. He was always thoughtful like that. Thoughtful, Poirot echoed, his tone neutral but probing. And yet, madame, you seemed uneasy tonight. Was there something in Monsieur Drayton's manner that troubled you? Eleanor's eyes met Poirot's for a fleeting moment before dropping to her lap. No, nothing. I was just tired. It's been a long week. Poirot nodded, filing away her hesitation. He turned to Dr. Grayson, whose nervous fidgeting had not abated. Doctor, you treated Monsieur Drayton for headaches, oui? Did he ever speak of stress, of pressures in his work or personal life? Grayson adjusted his spectacles. His voice energy seemed to pulse through the room. Monsieur Marsh, you spoke of Monsieur Drayton's ambitions. Did he ever confide in you about a specific plan, a venture perhaps that might have threatened someone in this house? Marsh's fingers stilled, his smile faltering. He talked big, like I said. Wanted to start his own firm, maybe. But it was just talk. I didn't take it seriously. Poirot's gaze lingered on him, unblinking. And yet, monsieur, ambition is a dangerous thing. It breeds envy, resentment. Perhaps someone felt that Monsieur Drayton's dreams were too close to their own. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the guests. Lady Cranston, her cheerful facade crumbling, spoke up hesitantly. Monsieur Poirot, I don't know if it matters, but I saw something odd before dinner. Philip was in the hall, speaking with someone on the telephone. He seemed upset. I couldn't hear much, but he said something about not going through with it. I thought it was just business, but now... Poirot's eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. Madame, you have given us a jewel. A conversation heated on the eve of his death. We must know more. Monsieur Carson, you mentioned a similar call yesterday. Was it the same voice, perhaps? Carson shook his head. I couldn't say, sir. I only heard Mr. Drayton's side, And it was brief. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A telephone call, a note, a smudge of mud. These are the threads we weave. But there is one more detail I must examine. He turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. The glove, mes amis. A single glove left on a chair in the dining room. Whose is it? And why was it abandoned? The guests exchanged puzzled glances. But it was Eleanor who spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. It's mine. I must have dropped it during dinner. Poirot's eyes met hers, steady and searching. A small thing, madame. But in a murder, there are no small things. We shall see what this glove tells us. As the guests dispersed to await further questioning,
Holding its breath, waiting for Poirot to unravel the next thread in the tapestry of Philip Drayton's murder. Inspector Japp had returned from the study, his notebook bristling with fresh notes. "Right, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff with frustration. "We've got the coroner's report nailed down. Drayton died instantly, single stab to the heart, no defensive wounds. The killer was quick, precise. And that glove you mentioned, Mrs. Vane's, it's clean, no blood, no prints. Doesn't prove much, but it's odd she left it behind." Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the edge of his mustache. "Odd indeed, Inspector. A glove abandoned, a window opened, a clock stopped. These are not accidents, but signatures. And now, we must seek the lies that hide beneath the surface, for it is there that the killer's hand will be revealed." He turned to Eleanor Vane, whose pale face seemed almost translucent in the lamplight. "Madame Vane," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "you have claimed the glove as yours. A small oversight, perhaps, to leave it on a chair. But tell me, was there anything else you left behind in the dining room, or perhaps in the study?" Eleanor's eyes widened, her hands trembling slightly. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't go near the study. I was with Lucy, fetching my shawl, and then I returned to the dining room. The glove, I must have dropped it during dinner. I was distracted." "Distracted," Poirot repeated, his voice soft as a whisper. "And what, madam, distracted you so? A conversation, perhaps, or a thought of Monsieur Drayton?" Sir Reginald Vane's voice cut through the room like a whip. "That's enough, Poirot. My wife has answered your questions. She had no reason to harm Philip. He was our secretary. Nothing more." Poirot's gaze flicked to Sir Reginald, his expression serene but unyielding. "Nothing more, you say? Yet, Sir Reginald, the heart is a complex thing. It holds loyalties, jealousies, desires. Monsieur Drayton, as your secretary, knew your affairs intimately. Perhaps he knew too much." A heavy silence fell, a similar call before dinner, where he spoke of not going through with it. "We must know more. Who else in this house might have overheard these conversations?" Carson, the butler, stood rigidly, his face a mask of restraint. "I'm afraid I heard nothing more, sir. The study door was closed, and I was attending to my duties." "But," he hesitated, his eyes flickering toward Julian Marsh, "I did notice Mr. Marsh in the hall yesterday afternoon, near the study, when Mr. Drayton was on the telephone." Marsh's face flushed, his voice sharp. "What are you implying, Carson?" "I was passing through, that's all. I didn't hear a thing. Drayton was always on the phone. Business, probably. He was ambitious, like I said." "Ambitious," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "And ambition, Monsieur Marsh, often breeds enemies. Tell me, did you and Monsieur Drayton ever discuss a venture that might have caused friction?" Marsh's fingers drummed against his thigh, his smile forced. "We talked stocks, investments, nothing serious. He wanted to break into the market on his own.
but he didn't have the capital. I told him it was a tough game. That's all. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Lady Cranston, whose plump hands twisted her lace handkerchief. Madame, you are a woman of observation. You heard Monsieur Drayton's words, not going through with it. Did you see his face, his demeanor? Was he angry, afraid, resolute? Lady Cranston hesitated, her eyes darting to the others. He seemed upset, Monsieur Poirot. His voice was low, but there was an edge to it. I couldn't see his face clearly. He was turned away in the hall. But I had the impression he was arguing with someone he knew well. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Someone he knew well. A most valuable observation, madame. And now, let us consider another lie that has surfaced. He turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. The papers on the desk, scattered as if in a struggle, yet the inkpot, overturned, spilled no ink on the floor. A curious detail, no? It suggests that
He seemed too familiar. A confidence shared, perhaps, that made you uneasy. Eleanor's voice was barely audible. He once mentioned something about Sir Reginald's investments. Said there were risks I should know about, for my own protection. I told him it wasn't his place, and he apologized. Sir Reginald's face reddened, his voice a low growl. What? He dared to speak to you about my affairs? The insolence! Poirot's eyes flicked to Sir Reginald, noting the sudden flare of anger. Insolence, Sir Reginald, or loyalty misplaced? Monsieur Drayton, it seems, was not content to remain in his place, and that, perhaps, was his undoing. The room fell silent, the weight of new revelations settling over the guests. Hastings leaned toward Poirot, his voice low. You're uncovering something, Poirot. That telephone call, the staged desk, Eleanor's glove, they're all connected, aren't they? Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. Connected, Hastings, as the stars are connected in a constellation. But we must see the whole pattern, not just the brightest points. The lies, they multiply, but the truth, it is close. As the guests dispersed to await further questioning, Poirot lingered by the fireplace, his mind turning over the new details, the telephone call, the staged desk, the glove, the mud. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Yet Poirot knew that the lies, like shadows, would soon betray the shape of the truth. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The air in the drawing room at No. 7 Lanverley Mews was thick with the residue of suspicion, each guest caught in the tightening coils of Hercule Poirot's relentless inquiry. The gas lamps flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the secrets of the house. Captain Hastings, seated near the window, felt his heart quicken as he watched Poirot, whose calm exterior masked a mind racing toward the truth. The murder of Philip Drayton had peeled back the veneer of civility, exposing raw nerves and hidden faint, almost imperceptible. The next move, mon cher Japp, is to listen, not to words, but to the silences between them. The killer, they have woven a careful web, but it is fraying. Let us see who will unravel first. He turned to Eleanor Vane, whose pale face seemed to glow with a fragile intensity. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, betrayed a tremor that had not been there before. Madame Vane, Poirot said gently, you have told us of Monsieur Drayton's kindness, his concern for your welfare. You mentioned a conversation about your husband's investments, a warning, perhaps. But was there more?
Did he ever speak of something personal? Eleanor's eyes widened, and for a moment it seemed she might speak, but then her lips pressed into a thin line and she shook her head. No, Monsieur Poirot. It was just business. He overstepped, and I told him so. That was all. Sir Reginald Vane, seated beside her, gripped the arm of his chair, his knuckles whitening. I've had enough of this, Poirot, he growled. You're hounding my wife for no reason. Drayton was my secretary, and if he spoke out of turn, it was nothing worth killing over. Poirot's gaze flicked to Sir Reginald, his expression serene but piercing. Nothing, Sir Reginald? Yet a man is dead, and the truth, it is rarely nothing. Let us consider another possibility. He turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. Monsieur Drayton, he was a man of ambition, oui? A man who knew secrets, financial, personal, perhaps dangerous. And one of you, I believe, shared a secret with him that could not be allowed to surface. A gasp escaped Lady Cranston, her plump hands clutching her handkerchief. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, surely you don't think one of us shared something so terrible? Poirot's eyes softened as they met hers. Madame, the heart is a complex thing. It holds love, fear, betrayal, and sometimes it breaks under the weight of its own secrets. It was then that Clara Beaumont, her sharp tongue silent for once, let out a choked sob. The sound was so unexpected that the room turned.
He didn't threaten me outright, but I could tell he was holding it over me. I was afraid he'd tell others. Poirot's gaze was steady, unblinking. And what did you do, mademoiselle, with this fear? Clara's eyes widened, her voice rising in panic. Nothing! I swear it, I didn't kill him. I was angry, yes, but I couldn't. She broke off, her sobs filling the room. Sir Reginald's face darkened, his voice cold. Clara, you're making a fool of yourself. If Drayton was blackmailing you, why didn't you come to me? I could have dealt with him. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the tension. Blackmail, Sir Reginald. A strong word, but let us explore it. Mademoiselle Beaumont, did Monsieur Drayton ask for anything? Money, favors, in exchange for his silence? Clara shook her head, her voice choked. No, he didn't. He just smiled, like he knew he had power over me. I hated him for it, but I didn't kill him. I was in the dining room the whole time. You all saw me. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. He turned to Julian Marsh, whose restless energy had stilled, his face pale. Monsieur Marsh, you spoke of Monsieur Drayton's ambitions. Did he ever hint at knowing something about you, something that might have threatened your own plans? Marsh's eyes darted to Clara, then back to Poirot. No, nothing like that. We talked business, like I said. If he was digging into anyone's secrets, it wasn't mine. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Grayson, whose nervous fidgeting had returned with a vengeance. And you, Doctor, a man of medicine, you know the fragility of life. Did Monsieur Drayton know something about you? A mistake, perhaps, or a secret from your practice? Grayson's spectacles slipped, his voice trembling. I've told you, I barely knew him. He came to me for headaches, nothing more. I'm not a man with secrets, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot's smile was faint, but knowing. Everyone, Doctor, has secrets. The question is whether they are worth killing for. The room fell silent. Clara's confession hanging like a storm cloud. Hastings, watching closely, noted the way Eleanor's eyes lingered on Clara, a flicker of sympathy, or perhaps guilt. Tell me more. I thought it was just his way of being dramatic. Sir Reginald's face reddened, his voice a low growl. Papers? What nonsense is this? My affairs are in order, and Drayton had no business prying into them. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Prying, Sir Reginald? Or protecting? Perhaps Monsieur Drayton saw something that threatened not just him, but others in this house. As the guests absorbed the weight of Clara's breakdown and Lady Cranston's revelation, Poirot stepped back, his mind racing. Hastings leaned toward him, his voice low. Clara's confession, Poirot. It's a breakthrough, isn't it? She had a motive, a real one. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A motive, Hastings. Yes. But a motive is not a murder. We have found a crack in the facade. But the truth, it is deeper still. And now we must watch, for the next crack will come soon.
Chapter 9. The Trap. The drawing room at number 7 Lanverley Mews had become a crucible of nerves, the air charged with the electric tension of secrets laid bare. Hercule Poirot stood at its heart, his small, impeccable figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm. His green eyes gleamed with the quiet certainty of a man closing in on his prey, and his moustache, perfectly symmetrical, seemed almost to quiver with anticipation. Captain Hastings, seated near the door, felt his pulse quicken as he watched his friend prepare to spring a trap. The murder of Philip Drayton had unravelled the polite facade of the household, and now Poirot was ready to apply the pressure that would reveal the killer. Inspector Japp, his notebook now a well-worn companion, leaned against the wall, his eyes narrowing as he sensed the shift in Poirot's demeanour. "You're up to something, aren't you, Poirot?" he said, his voice a mix of curiosity and exasperation. "I know that look. You've got a plan to shake things up." Poirot's smile was faint but deliberate. "Mon cher Japp, a plan? No. Merely an invitation. The truth, it is like a shy guest. It must be coaxed into the light. And tonight we shall coax it with a gathering of minds." He turned to the assembled guests, his voice rising with a theatrical clarity that commanded attention. "Mes amis, we have learned much this evening. Monsieur Drayton, a man of ambition, knew secrets, secrets of finance, of reputation, of the heart. A note lured him to his death at 8:30. A letter opener ended his life, and a staged scene sought to mislead us. But now I propose we gather once more in the study where the crime was committed. There we shall reconstruct the events, and perhaps the killer will reveal themselves." A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Sir Reginald Vane's face darkened, his voice sharp. "Reconstruct? What nonsense is this, Poirot? The police have already examined the study. What more do you hope to find?" Poirot's eyes met Sir Reginald's, steady and unyielding. "I hope to find the truth." They had left it, save for the absence of Drayton's body, which had been removed by the coroner. The silver letter opener, now bagged as evidence, was gone, but the desk remained, its scattered papers and overturned inkpot preserved under Japp's orders. The stopped clock still read 8:47, a silent witness to the moment of death. The open window let in a chill breeze, and the smudge of mud on the sill gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Poirot positioned himself by the desk, his small frame commanding the room. "Mes amis," he said, "let us imagine the scene. It is 8:30, and Monsieur Drayton is here, summoned by a note. He is expecting someone he trusts, or at least someone he cannot refuse. The door is ajar, the window open. The killer enters, and in a moment of precision, the letter opener finds its mark. But why here? Why now? Let us test the alibis." He turned to Eleanor, his voice gentle but probing. "Madame Vane, you were in the corridor at 8:15, meeting your maid Lucy. You returned to the dining room by 8:25, oui? Let us see." He gestured to the door. "Walk to the staircase as you did, and return. We shall time it." Eleanor hesitated, then rose, her emerald gown rustling as she moved. She stepped into the corridor, her footsteps echoing faintly, and returned within 2 minutes. "As I said," she murmured, "I was only gone a moment." Poirot nodded, his eyes flicking to the clock. 2 minutes, madame. Enough time, perhaps, to ascend to the study, but not to linger. And yet, Your glove was found in the dining room, abandoned. A distraction, perhaps? Eleanor's face paled, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Dr. Grayson. Doctor, you left the dining room at 8:20 for a handkerchief. Show us. Grayson, his hands trembling, complied, stepping into the hall and returning with a handkerchief from his coat pocket. The journey took less than a minute. As I said, he muttered, it was quick. Poirot's gaze shifted to Julian Marsh inside. Someone, perhaps, knew the key's hiding place. His eyes swept the room, lingering on each face. And now, a final test. I ask each of you to write the words of the note. 8:30, meet me, urgent, and we shall compare the handwriting. A collective intake of breath followed. Japp, sensing the moment, produced paper and a pen, passing them to each guest. As they wrote, Poirot watched, his eyes noting every hesitation, every glance. When the samples were collected, he examined them closely, his expression unreadable. It is curious, he said at last, how the hand betrays the heart. One of these samples is most interesting, but I shall say no more for now. Clara Beaumont, her composure fraying, spoke up, her voice sharp. This is a trick, isn't it? You're trying to scare us into confessing something we didn't do. Poirot's smile was serene. Mademoiselle, I seek only the truth, and the truth, it is like a mirror. It reflects what we wish to hide. Someone in this room met Monsieur Drayton at 8:30. Someone plunged the letter opener into his heart. And someone, I believe, is feeling the weight of their actions. The room fell silent, the guests' faces a gallery of fear and defiance. Hastings, watching closely, noted the way Eleanor's hands trembled, the way Grayson's spectacles fogged with sweat, the way Marsh's eyes darted to the door. Sir Reginald's anger seemed to simmer, while Lady Cranston's gaze was fixed on Poirot, as if pleading for resolution. Japp stepped forward, his voice low. You're pushing them hard, Poirot. Think one of them's about to crack? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Crack, Japp? No, they will shatter. And when they do, the truth will be ours. As the guests returned to the drawing room, their nerves frayed, Hastings leaned toward Poirot, his voice a whisper. That was a master stroke, Poirot. The handwriting, the reenactment, you're closing in, aren't you? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The trap, Hastings, is set. Now we wait for the quarry to step into it. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The Reveal. The study at number 7. You've been poking and prodding all night. Let's have it. What's the truth behind this mess? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Mon cher Japp, the truth, it is like a fine wine. It must be savored slowly to appreciate its complexity. But now, mes amis, the moment has come. The puzzle of Monsieur Drayton's death is complete, and Hercule Poirot shall reveal the hand that struck the fatal blow. The guests, gathered in a tense semicircle, exchanged uneasy glances. Sir Reginald Vane's stern face was set in a scowl. Eleanor's pale hands trembled in her lap. Clara Beaumont's sharp eyes gleamed with defiance. Dr. Grayson's spectacles fogged with nervous sweat, and Julian Marsh's restless energy seemed to falter. Lady Cranston clutched her handkerchief, her usual cheer replaced by a quiet dread, while Carson, the butler, stood impassively by the door. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice clear and deliberate. Let us begin with the facts. Monsieur Philip Drayton was killed between 8:30 and 8:47, stabbed through the heart with a letter opener belonging to Sir Reginald. A note, 8:30, meet me, urgent, lured him to this study. The clock was stopped at 8:47. The desk was staged to suggest a struggle, and a smudge of mud on the windowsill hinted at an outsider. But these, mes amis,
were distractions. The truth lies in the details. He paced slowly, his eyes sweeping the room. First, the note. It was written in haste, yet with purpose, and found in Monsieur Drayton's pocket. It suggested a meeting he could not refuse. But with whom? Each of you had opportunity, and each, I believe, had motive. Let us examine these motives. He turned to Clara Beaumont. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you confess that Monsieur Drayton knew of your past, a fraudulent investment that cost you dearly. You feared he might expose you. A powerful motive, oui, but your presence in the dining room is confirmed by all. You could not have reached the study in time. Clara's lips pursed, but she said nothing. Her eyes
was the weapon. And Monsieur Drayton knew your financial affairs perhaps too well. You were in the dining room, but your temper, it is formidable. Could you have slipped away? No, the timing does not permit it. Eleanor's eyes widened as Poirot's gaze settled on her. Madame Vane, you were near the staircase at 8:15, meeting your maid. Your glove, left in the dining room, suggests distraction, or perhaps a deliberate act. Monsieur Drayton was close to you. Too close, perhaps, for your husband's liking. But your delicate frame, your trembling hands, they do not speak of a killer's resolve. Poirot paused, letting the tension build. And yet, there is one whose actions do not align, whose silences speak louder than words. He turned to Carson, the butler, who stood rigidly by the door, his face impassive. Monsieur Carson, you have been the shadow in this house, seeing all, seeing little. You spoke of a telephone call, of Monsieur Drayton's agitation. You knew the garden gate's key, the routines of this house, and your handwriting. It matches the note. A gasp rippled through the room. Carson's face remained still, but his eyes flickered with a sudden intensity. That's absurd, sir, he said, his voice steady. I'm a servant, nothing more. Why would I kill Mr. Drayton? Poirot's smile was cold. Why indeed? Let us reconstruct. Monsieur Drayton was not just a secretary. He was a man who pried. He discovered something in this house, something that threatened you. Not money, not reputation, but loyalty. You have served Sir Reginald for years, oui? But you also served another, Madame Vane. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Sir Reginald's face reddened, his voice a low growl. What are you saying, Poirot? Poirot continued undeterred. Monsieur Drayton, he grew too close to Madame Vane, offering advice, warnings about investments. But you, Carson, saw more. You saw a man who threatened the stability of this house, who perhaps harbored ambitions beyond his station. You wrote the note, luring him to the study at 8:30. You entered through the garden gate, leaving the mud on the proof, he whispered. Poirot held up the note, his voice triumphant. The proof, monsieur, is here. Your handwriting, your knowledge of the house, your opportunity. You were in the corridor at 8:30, unseen, as the others were distracted. You killed Philip Drayton to protect a secret you could not bear to see revealed. A choked sob escaped Eleanor, and Sir Reginald rose, his face a mask of fury. Carson, is this true? Carson's shoulders slumped, his voice breaking. I only wanted to protect her. Drayton was digging, asking questions about the accounts. He was going to ruin everything. Her, you, this house. I couldn't let him. Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs gleaming. That's enough, Carson. You're under arrest for the murder of Philip Drayton. As Carson was led away, the room erupted in murmurs. Eleanor buried her face in her hands, and Sir Reginald sank into his chair, his anger giving way to shock. Hastings leaned toward Poirot, his voice low. You did it, Poirot. You saw through it all, the note, the mud, the loyalty. Brilliant.
Poirot's smile was modest. "The little grey cells, Hastings. They see what others miss. The truth, it was always there, waiting to be found." Chapter 11. The Reflection. The study at number 7 Lanverley Mews, so recently the stage for a grim tragedy, now felt eerily still, as if the house itself exhaled in relief at the unmasking of Philip Drayton's killer. The gas lamps burned low, casting soft shadows across the room, and the stopped clock, frozen at 8:47, seemed a silent testament to the moment when truth had prevailed. Hercule Poirot stood by the desk, his small figure radiating a quiet satisfaction, his green eyes reflecting the flicker of the lamplight. Captain Hastings, lingering near the door, watched his friend with a familiar mix of awe and curiosity, knowing that Poirot's work was not yet complete, not until he had shared the philosophy that underpinned his triumph. Inspector Japp, his handcuffs now securing Carson's wrists, wiped his brow.
Exhaustion. Eleanor Vane, her eyes red-rimmed, clutched a handkerchief, her gaze distant. Clara Beaumont's sharp tongue was silent, her earlier defiance replaced by a quiet contemplation. Dr. Lionel Grayson adjusted his spectacles absently, while Julian Marsh leaned against the wall, his restless energy subdued. Lady Cranston, her plump hands still twisting her lace handkerchief, looked to Poirot as if seeking reassurance. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice calm but resonant. "Mes amis," he began, "a tragedy has unfolded in this house, but it is a tragedy born of human frailty. Monsieur Drayton, a man of ambition, sought to climb beyond his station. He uncovered secrets, financial, personal, dangerous, and in doing so, he stirred the heart of one whose loyalty could not bear betrayal." He turned to Eleanor, his tone gentle. "Madame Vane, you were the unwitting center of this storm. Monsieur Drayton's concern for you, his warnings about your husband's investments, were not merely kindness. They were a bid for your trust, perhaps your affection. But Carson, he saw a threat not to Sir Reginald's wealth, but to the stability of this household. To you." Eleanor's voice trembled as she spoke. "I never encouraged him, Monsieur Poirot. I thought he was just being helpful. I never imagined it would lead to this." Poirot nodded, his eyes softening. "The heart, madame. It is a fragile thing. It seeks connection, but it also breeds jealousy, fear, and in Carson's case, a misguided devotion. He believed he was protecting you, but in truth, he was protecting his own vision of this house, a vision where order and loyalty reigned supreme." Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse, his anger spent. "Carson, I trusted him. He was with me for 20 years. How could I not see it?" Poirot's gaze met his, steady and compassionate. "So Reginald ended like this." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Madame, life is a fragile gift, and ambition, it can be a dangerous flame. Monsieur Drayton's ambition led him to pry where he should not, and Carson's loyalty led him to murder. It is a lesson, in the balance of the human heart." Hastings, watching closely, leaned toward Poirot, his voice low. "You saw it all, Poirot. The note, the mud, Carson's loyalty. But how did you know it wasn't just a crime of passion?" Poirot's eyes gleamed.
passion, Hastings, is chaotic. This crime was orderly, planned. The note was written in Carson's hand. The mud was from the garden he tended, and the letter opener was chosen to cast suspicion on Sir Reginald. It was a crime of the mind, not the heart, though the heart, it provided the motive. Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff but respectful. "You've got away with this, Poirot. I'll make sure Carson's booked, and we'll wrap up the evidence. But I'll be damned if I know how you do it every time." Poirot's smile was modest. "It is the method, Japp. The method of observation, of logic, of understanding the human soul. The little grey cells, they do not fail." As the guests began to disperse, their voices subdued, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression serene. "Come, mon ami. Our work here is done. The truth has been found, and now we leave this house to heal." They stepped out into the cool night air of Lanverley Mews, the cobbled lane quiet under the glow of the gas lamps. Hastings glanced at his friend, a question forming. "Poirot, do you ever tire of it? The lies, the secrets, the darkness in people?" Poirot paused, his cane tapping lightly against the cobbles. "Tire, Hastings? No. For every darkness, there is a truth to be found, a balance to be restored. It is the work of Hercule Poirot to bring order to chaos, and in that, I find my purpose." With a final glance at the house,
Reginald Vane sat by the fireplace, his stern face etched with fatigue, while Eleanor, her auburn hair slightly dishevelled, stared into her untouched tea. Clara Beaumont, her sharp tongue silenced, sat with a rare air of introspection. Dr. Lionel Grayson and Julian Marsh, both subdued, occupied opposite corners of the room, while Lady Cranston, her usual cheer absent, fidgeted with her handkerchief. Poirot set his cup down with a delicate clink, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "Mes amis," he said, his tone calm but resonant, "the truth has been revealed, and Monsieur Carson has confessed his crime. Yet I sense that questions remain, questions that linger in the heart. Hercule Poirot does not leave a puzzle incomplete, so let us address these echoes of truth." Sir Reginald looked up, his voice rough. "What more is there to say, Poirot? Carson killed Philip. You've proved it. The man I trusted for 20 years betrayed me. It's done." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of gentle disagreement. "Done, Sir Reginald? No, not entirely. A crime, it leaves ripples. And these ripples, they must be understood. Monsieur Carson acted out of loyalty, a loyalty twisted by his perception of danger. But what was this danger? Let us reflect." He turned to Eleanor, whose pale hands gripped her teacup tightly. "Madame Vane, you were the heart of this tragedy, though not its cause. Monsieur Drayton's attention to you, his warnings about your husband's investments, were they truly for your benefit, or did they conceal a deeper motive?" Eleanor's eyes met Poirot's, filled with a mix of guilt and sorrow. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. Philip was kind, but perhaps too kind. I thought he was concerned for me, but now I wonder if he was using me to get at Reginald's affairs. I should have seen it." Poirot nodded, his expression compassionate. "The heart, madame, it is easily swayed by kindness. You were not to blame. Carson, however, saw in Monsieur Drayton a threat, not just to your marriage, but to the order of this house. His devotion to you, it blinded him." Clara Beaumont protect himself. The mud on the windowsill, from the garden he tended, was meant to suggest an outsider. The open window, the scattered papers, these were his efforts to create confusion. But the handwriting on the note, it betrayed him. The little grey cells. They do not overlook such details. Julian Marsh, his usual bravado dimmed, leaned forward. And the telephone call? The one Lady Cranston overheard. Drayton saying he wouldn't go through with it. What was that about? Poirot's eyes flicked to Lady Cranston, who nodded hesitantly. A most pertinent question, Monsieur Marsh. That call. It was the spark that ignited Carson's resolve. Monsieur Drayton, I believe, was refusing to act on a plan. Perhaps to expose Sir Reginald's financial troubles. Perhaps to pursue a closer connection with Madame Vane. Carson overheard enough to feel threatened, and he acted to silence him. Lady Cranston's voice trembled. I should have said more, Monsieur Poirot. I thought it was just business, but if I'd known. Poirot raised a hand, his tone gentle. Madame, you could not have known. The heart of this crime was hidden, even from those closest to it. But now, the truth is clear, and we must learn from it. Sir Reginald's voice was low, almost broken. I trusted Drayton. I trusted Carson, and now, my house is in ruins. What am I to do, Poirot? Poirot's gaze softened, his voice steady. Sir Reginald, you rebuild. You look to your wife, to your future. The past, it is a lesson, not a chain. Monsieur Drayton's ambition and Carson's loyalty. They were flaws of the human heart, but they need not define this house. Eleanor reached for her husband's hand, her eyes glistening. Reginald, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this. Sir Reginald squeezed her hand, his stern features softening. It's not your fault, Eleanor. I should have seen the cracks in my own house. Poirot stepped back, his work nearly complete. Mes amis, the truth is a mirror. It shows us what we wish to hide, but also what we may become.
Right, Poirot? After all this?
Poirot paused, his cane tapping lightly against the cobbles.
They will heal, Hastings, as all must who face the truth. The heart, it is resilient, even when wounded. And we move on to the next puzzle. For the world, it is never short of mysteries. With a final nod to the house, Poirot walked briskly towards the end of the mews, his small figure a symbol of order in a world of chaos, leaving behind a household forever changed by the echoes of truth. Chapter 13. The Unseen Wounds. The pale light of late morning seeped through the windows of number 7 Lanverley Mews, softening the edges of a house still raw from the revelation of Philip Drayton's murder. The drawing room, once a stage for polite pleasantries, now held the quiet weight of truth laid bare. Hercule Poirot sat in a velvet upholstered chair, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, his green eyes scanning the room with a mixture of compassion and scrutiny. Captain Hastings, standing by the mantel, felt a pang of sympathy for the guests, whose lives had been irrevocably altered by the events of the previous night. Yet he knew Poirot's work was not done. There were still unseen wounds to address, threads of human frailty to unravel. The guests, though free to leave, lingered as if tethered by the gravity of the moment. Sir Reginald Vane, his broad shoulders slumped, stared into the dying embers of the fire. Eleanor Vane, her auburn hair catching the light, sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, a gesture of tentative reconciliation. Clara Beaumont, her sharp edges softened by reflection, sipped a cup of tea with uncharacteristic restraint. Dr. Lionel Grayson, his spectacles polished to a gleam, seemed lost in thought, while Julian Marsh, his restless energy subdued, gazed out of the window at the quiet mews. Lady Cranston, her handkerchief now a crumpled relic, looked to Poirot with a mixture of gratitude and unease. Poirot set his tisane down with a delicate clink.
his voice cutting through the silence. "Mes amis," he said, his tone measured but resonant.
Helena's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Monsieur Poirot, I feel responsible. If I hadn't let Philip be so kind, so attentive, perhaps Carson wouldn't have—" She trailed off, her eyes glistening. Poirot leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. "Madame Vane, you are not to blame for the actions of others." Monsieur Drayton's kindness, it was a mask for his ambition, a way to gain influence. And Carson, his devotion to you was his own, not yours to control. You must forgive yourself, for only then can you mend what is broken. Clara Beaumont set her teacup down, her voice quieter than usual. "You're right about secrets, Monsieur Poirot. I was so afraid of Philip exposing my past, but now, it seems so small compared to this. I wish I'd been braver." Poirot's gaze met hers, his expression warm. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it. You spoke of your past last night, and in doing so, you freed yourself. That is bravery." Dr. Grayson, his hands steady for the first time, spoke up. "I keep thinking about Philip's headaches, his late nights. I should have seen he was under pressure, that something was wrong. Maybe I could have helped." Poirot nodded, his voice thoughtful. "Doctor, the role of a physician is to heal the body, but the mind, it is harder to mend. Monsieur Drayton chose his path, and you could not have foreseen its end. But your care, it was not wasted." Julian Marsh, his usual bravado absent, turned from the window. "I didn't trust Drayton, not really. He was too smooth, too eager. But I never thought he'd end up dead. Makes you wonder who you can trust." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Marsh, trust is a delicate thing, easily broken, but it is rebuilt through honesty, through understanding. Monsieur Drayton's ambition clouded his judgment, but yours, it can guide you to better choices." Lady Cranston's voice trembled as she spoke. "I keep replaying that telephone call, Monsieur Poirot."
That, Sir Reginald, is all one can ask. The unseen wounds, they heal with time, with truth, with forgiveness. This house, it will stand again, if you let it. As the guests began to gather their belongings, their movements slow but purposeful, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Come, mon ami, the muse awaits, and the world, it has other mysteries for us to solve." They stepped into the crisp air of Lanverley Mews, the cobbled lane bathed in the soft light of midday. The gas lamps, now extinguished, stood as silent sentinels, and the house behind them seemed to settle into a quieter grief. Hastings glanced at Poirot, a question forming. "Do you think they'll find peace, Poirot, after all this?" Poirot paused, his cane tapping lightly against the cobbles. "Peace, Hastings, is a journey, not a destination. They have begun it, and that is enough. For now, we leave them to it, and we continue our work. For the truth, it never rests." With a final glance at number 7, Poirot walked briskly toward the end of the mews, his small figure a symbol of relentless clarity, leaving behind a household poised on the edge of healing, its unseen wounds beginning to mend in the light of truth. Chapter 14. The Weight of Silence. The afternoon light cast long shadows across the cobbled lane of Lanverley Mews, softening the stark edges of number 7, where the echoes of Philip Drayton's murder still lingered. Inside, the drawing-room was a quiet sanctuary, its once vibrant air now subdued by the weight of truth and the slow process of healing.
Hercule Poirot stood near the window, his small, impeccable figure framed against the pale daylight, his green eyes reflecting a calm but penetrating awareness. Captain Hastings, seated by the fireplace, watched his friend with a mix of admiration and curiosity, sensing that Poirot's work, though nearly complete, had one final act to play. The guests, still gathered despite the ordeal, seemed bound by an unspoken need to confront the aftermath. Sir Reginald Vane, his stern demeanor softened by exhaustion, sat beside Eleanor, whose hand he held with a tenderness that had been absent before.
Weary. What more is there to say, Poirot? You've solved the case. Carson's betrayal, Drayton's ambition, it's all laid bare. What's left? Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with gentle insistence. What is left, Sir Reginald, is the heart of this house. The truth has been found, but the silences, between husband and wife, between friends, between master and servant, these must be broken if you are to move forward. Eleanor's eyes glistened, her voice soft but steady. You're right, Monsieur Poirot. I've been silent too long. I should have told Reginald about Philip's warnings, about his attention. I thought I was protecting him, but I only made things worse. Sir Reginald turned to her, his stern features softening further. Eleanor, I should have listened, should have seen you were struggling. I was so caught up in my work, my pride. I let Carson and Drayton slip through the cracks. Poirot nodded, his expression compassionate. The fault, Sir Reginald, is not yours alone. Silence is a shared burden. Monsieur Drayton used his charm to gain trust, but it was Carson's silence, his refusal to speak of his fears, that led to tragedy. And you, Madame Vane, your silence was born of loyalty, but it allowed misunderstandings to fester. Clara Beaumont set her teacup down, her voice quieter than usual. I kept silent about my past, too. I was so afraid of being judged, of losing what little respect I had. If I'd been open, maybe Philip wouldn't have had such power over me. Poirot's gaze met hers, warm but direct. Mademoiselle Beaumont, your silence was your shield, but it was also your cage. By speaking last night, you broke free. That is a strength few possess. Dr. Grayson, his hands steady for once, spoke up. I stayed silent about Philip's headaches, his stress. I thought it wasn't my place to pry. But maybe if I'd asked more questions, I could have seen he was in over his head. Poirot's tone was gentle, but firm. Doctor, your role is to heal, not to foresee. You acted with care, and that is enough. Silence in your... Hastings, watching the exchange, felt a swell of respect for Poirot's ability to guide without judging. He leaned toward his friend, his voice low. You're not just closing the case, Poirot. You're helping them find their voices again. Poirot's smile was faint, but genuine. Hastings, a crime is a wound, but silence is the infection that festers. To heal, one must speak. And I, Hercule Poirot, am here to listen. Sir Reginald rose, his hand still clasped with Eleanor's. You've given us a path, Poirot. It won't be easy, but we'll try. No more silences, not between us. Eleanor nodded, her eyes meeting his. We'll talk, Reginald, about everything. Drayton, the investments, us. I promise. Poirot inclined his head, his voice steady. That, mes amis, is the beginning of healing. The weight of silence is heavy, but the truth, it is lighter than you know. As the guests began to prepare for their departure, their movements carrying a newfound purpose, Poirot turned to Hastings. Come, mon ami, the muse grows quiet, and our work here is done. Let us leave this house to its new beginning. They stepped into the crisp afternoon air of Lanverley Mews, the cobbled lane bathed in the soft glow of sunlight. The house behind them stood as a silent witness to its own transformation,
its wounds beginning to mend through the breaking of silence. Hastings glanced at Poirot, a question forming. "Do you think they'll keep talking, Poirot? Will they really heal?" Poirot paused, his cane tapping lightly against the cobbles. "They will, Hastings, for they have seen the cost of silence. The heart, it is resilient when given voice, and we move on to the next mystery. For the world, it is full of secrets, waiting to be spoken." With a final nod to number 7, Poirot walked briskly toward the end of the mews, his small figure a symbol of clarity and compassion, leaving behind a household ready to face its future with open hearts and honest words. Chapter 15. The Final Farewell. The late afternoon sun bathed Lanverley Mews in a golden haze, softening the sharp edges of the cobbled lane and rebuild what had been shaken. Clara Beaumont, her sharp demeanor tempered, gathered her belongings with a newfound calm. Dr. Lionel Grayson, his spectacles gleaming, offered a tentative smile, while Julian Marsh, his restless energy finally at rest, nodded thoughtfully. Lady Cranston, her handkerchief tucked away, radiated a quiet optimism, as if the breaking of silence had restored her faith in human connection. Poirot turned from the window, his voice clear and resonant, carrying the weight of finality. "Mes amis," he said, "the tragedy of Monsieur Drayton's death has been resolved, and the truth has set you free from the shadows of silence. But as we part, let us reflect one last time on what has been learned, for the lessons of the heart are as enduring as the truth itself." Sir Reginald's voice was steady, though tinged with emotion. "You've done more than solve a crime, Poirot. You've shown us what we were too blind to see, our own failings, our own silences. I don't know how to thank you." Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile modest but warm. "Sir Reginald, the thanks of Hercule Poirot are in the order restored. You and Madame Vane have faced the truth, and in doing so, you have strengthened the bond that holds this house together. That is reward enough." Eleanor's eyes glistened, her voice soft but resolute. "I was afraid to speak, Monsieur Poirot, afraid of what it would mean for Reginald, for me, but you've shown me that truth, however painful, is the only way forward. We'll rebuild, together." Poirot inclined his head, his expression compassionate. "Madame, the courage to speak is the courage to live. You have found it, and it will carry you far." Clara Beaumont, her voice quieter than usual, stepped forward. "I spent years hiding my past, fearing judgment. You made me see that facing it was the only way to let it go. I'm grateful, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, the past is a shadow only if we let it linger. You have
Poirot's smile was warm. "Madame, your heart is generous, and your observations were the key to this puzzle. Never doubt the power of what you see, Hastings." Watching the exchange, felt a swell of pride for his friend's ability to weave compassion into justice. He leaned toward Poirot, his voice low. "You've not only solved the case, Poirot, but given them a future. That's a rare gift." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Hastings, the role of Hercule Poirot is to bring order to chaos, but also to light the path forward. A crime is a wound, but the healing, it is the true victory." As the guests made their final preparations to leave, Sir Reginald approached Poirot, his hand extended. "If you're ever in need of a friend, Poirot, you'll find one here. You've saved more than my house. You've saved us." Poirot shook his hand, his grip firm. "Sir Reginald, the friendship of an honest man is a treasure. I shall not forget it." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice soft. "And you, Captain Hastings, thank you for standing by him. We owe you both so much." Hastings flushed, unaccustomed to such praise. Just doing my part, Mrs. Vane. Poirot's the genius. The guests departed one by one, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. The house, though scarred, seemed to breathe easier, its wounds beginning to close. Poirot and Hastings stepped into the fading light of Lanverley Mews, the cobbled lane serene under the late afternoon sun. The gas lamps, not yet lit, stood as silent sentinels, and the air carried the faint scent of autumn leaves. Hastings glanced at Poirot, a question forming. "Do you think they'll truly move on, Poirot, after all they've been through?" Poirot paused, his cane tapping lightly against the cobbles. "They will, Hastings, for they have faced the truth and found their voices. The heart, it heals when it is heard. And we, mon ami, we turn to the next adventure, for the world is full of mysteries, and Hercule Poirot is never far from them." With a final glance at number 7, Poirot walked briskly toward the end of the mews, his small figure a beacon of clarity and compassion, leaving behind a household transformed by truth and